Okay, this video is why I am a Christian, and in a sense, it's a little bit of a rebuttal of Bertrand Russell's famous 1927 lecture where he said why he is not a Christian, but it's more than that. First of all, we start with this painting right here, The Creation of Adam by Michaelangelo. This is the greatest painting of all time, the most important painting of all time, and this summarizes what actually really matters. Mankind, the biblical worldview, created in the image of God. Therefore, man is part divine, part beast, but also part divine. God is the creator, therefore man can also be a creator. And therefore, being part divine, man is entitled to divine rights, right to his privacy, right to property, right to freedom, right to free speech. These all come from mankind creating the image of God, and that is also what was in the Declaration of Independence of the United States, these rights endowed by the Creator, as written by Thomas Jefferson and approved by the Continental Congress of that time. And this is a big deal. Trust me, it all comes down to this painting. If you study metaphysics, history, philosophy, politics, it all comes down to this. And mankind is either agreed upon by society, created in the image of God, or he's not. And if he's not, then he's just an animal. He's just a primate monkey that talks, okay? So it's a lot better this way. Trust me, and I actually think it's true, too, based on extensive study of biology. I majored in evolutionary biology in college at Stanford, and I've read about 50 books on the subject beyond that. Okay, so anyways, magnificent painting created in the image of God. One of the other extraordinary things about Christianity is it produces the best art. There's lots of really smart people from all the different religions and all the different ethnic groups all over the world. But you know what? Nothing comes close to Christian art. I mean, look at this sculpture. It's more than magnificent. It's the best sculpture ever made. Michelangelo, when his mother died, this is called the Pietà, of course, and Michelangelo, when his mother died, he's only about 6, 7 years old. He was very sad, of course. And in this painting, and he was a young guy when he made this sculpture, I think in his early 20s, it sort of captures, a boy with his mother almost. She's so much bigger than the Christ, but it just works. It's magnificent. It's about his only sculpture that he signed it up to that point, and his name was on the sash there when somebody else actually thought it was maybe by someone else. He did that. It's just beautiful. It's magnificent. And Christianity does that. I don't know how it does it. Actually, I kind of do know how it does it. It inspires a person that the universe is rational, created by a rational God, and that we're meant to try to understand it. And we're meant to try to create beautiful things. Great art is usually in praise of God. And I just show you this painting here. This is back in 1435. Look how magnificent it is, Rogier van der Veen. He's a very, not as well known, but he's a magnificent painter. Him and Botticelli are the two best painters in the 1400s. And this is Descent from the Cross, and it was done for the Archers Guild, so you can see how the body position of Christ and Mary, his mother, they echo each other, and it's almost as if, Mary Magdalene, they're pulling his legs back as if it were like a bow. I mean, the faces, the expression, the artistic detail, it's magnificent. This is 1435. Okay, a little bit of the philosophical stuff. Some of the reasons for why I'm a Christian, besides all the religious arguments and stuff, I know all that stuff, I read all that stuff. We'll briefly mention some of that later, but the best music. I've made a couple videos about the best Christmas songs, the best Christian songs in general, a bunch of great Christian musicians and singers, John McCormick, one of the greatest opera singers of all time, of course, Pavarotti, the great Johnny Cash in country music, kind of a Christian country music singer, the Carter family. It goes on and on. It's the best music ever made in the history of the world, in my opinion. If anybody knows something better, go ahead, show me. I'm happy to learn. If I'm wrong about something, go ahead and tell me. I'll be happy to look it up and learn. Okay, but I doubt it, all right, because I've studied this stuff a long time. Over about 90% of what I would consider the great music in the world, probably more like 95%, comes from some type of Christian tradition. It inspires great music, this idea of honor God. Look at Bach. What did Bach say? Every single composition for the greater glory of God. Everything he did. Okay, the best architecture. Name a building as beautiful as the cathedrals. There's nothing even close that I'm aware of. Okay, look at the modern buildings. They stink. They're so ugly. All these office buildings and skyscrapers. They look like animal cages. Tom Wolfe has said this. The modern office building looks like an animal cage, and there's always a statue of a turd in front. Modern art is fake. It's a joke. It's a bunch of crap. It's trying to make a chump out of people. You should reject it, because modern art reflects a society, and if we allow modern art to represent our society, that's like saying our society is a turd, okay? It's not good. Picasso's a phony. He was a communist. He's a piece of crap, okay? He's a con man. Don't fall for the BS. That feeling you get in your heart, this is good, this is beautiful, this is true, it's usually correct, okay? So you should trust it. Don't be bullied by some phony intellectual trying to tell you that modern art is good. It's a bunch of crap, all right? The best paintings, one after another. I'm going to show you a couple of magnificent paintings here in this talk, but for everyone I'm showing you, there's 100 other ones that are in that ballpark. Not quite as good, but in that ballpark. And I used to think only the Catholics painted magnificently, but the Protestants had some good work, especially in the 1800s with the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. They did some magnificent work, inspired as well by the help from John Ruskin. I gave previous talks about John Ruskin and the sort of Victorian Renaissance, if you will, and a little bit about the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood as well. Okay, the best lecture, 1853 lecture by John Ruskin on the 3 ages of art. It's the best lecture ever in the history of art criticism. It's magnificent. Okay, way better than anything Oscar Wilde ever did. Come on. Okay, I like Oscar Wilde too. He's an Irish guy, but John Ruskin kicks his butt in art criticism. All right, best literature. Most of the best literature comes from the Christian tradition. The best novel, Les Mis by Victor Hugo. Actually, my favorite is Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky. And the simple reason is that that theme of redemption, it resonates with the human heart. That a person screwed up, and then they recognize it eventually, and then they try to make up for it. Like in Christmas Carol, when Scrooge turns his life around and becomes a good man, and he helps Tiny Tim to live. It's magnificent, okay? Atheism says that life is meaningless. How is life is meaningless going to inspire you to create great art? Okay, and I really like Ayn Rand. Even though she says she's an atheist, if you read Ayn Rand closely, and I've read her pretty extensively, she loves all the Christian writers. Her favorite writer by far is Victor Hugo. She says to read Victor Hugo is to have the feeling of walking into a cathedral. It's magnificent. And then she loves Dostoevsky. The two are like super intense Christian writers. And who else does she love? She loved Henry Sienkiewicz. He's a Polish writer who wrote Quo Vadis, another intensely religious book. And that's the book where St. Peter was leaving Rome in fear, and he saw Christ coming in towards Rome. And Christ asked him, where are you going? Quo Vadis. That's the name of the book, Quo Vadis. And then Christ said he's going back to Rome to be crucified again because St. Peter wasn't doing his job. So St. Peter said, okay, I'll go back to Rome. So anyways, that's an incredible story as well. Okay, the writing style of atheism tends to, modernism you can call it, is also, Ayn Rand describes it as a naturalistic style. It tends to highlight the vulgar. It's disgusting. It's sort of evil, and it's crap. It's no good. So basically, if you say that life is meaningless, where are you going to find a personal philosophy from meaninglessness? Nihilism, okay? It doesn't lead to anything. And my experience with atheists, there's a couple categories of them. There's the sad kids that are a mess, often, become alcoholics, drug addicts, or suicidal. If life is meaningless, why not get stoned and have a little fun in the moment and just end up being a screwed up loser? There's also people who sincerely are trying to figure out their beliefs. But then there's a third category. The most common category of atheists on the internet is people I think who are probably members of the Communist Party just trying to promote atheism. Because if they can dumb down society enough to buy that, then everyone's rights could be taken away. So it's amazing because you see all these angry atheists on the internet. Why are they so energized about it? Because they're trying to promote politics. Okay, all right. What else? Talked about Ayn Rand, how she loves all the Christian writers, and she herself had grown up in Russia as it was becoming communist, and they really mistreated her father. That pissed her off, and that lady is an incredible genius. Okay, best movies: Amadeus, Ten Commandments, with Cecil B. DeMille and Charlton Heston, The Wonderful Life. And again, there's this theme of redemption, okay, where, in The Wonderful Life, Jimmy Stewart learns to see life in a different way and realize how lucky he has it and gets that attitude of gratitude. That's the time back when a lot of movies were great. Modern movies are stink. They're made for, illiterate retards. A lot of action, thuggery, it's just titillation. It's just sort of superficial, cheap crap. I haven't had a TV, ever since I was a kid, and I don't even go to the movie theaters for decades because it's all crap. You can't produce a good movie when your baseline values are atheism. It doesn't produce anything of quality. It basically says a man has no soul. He's just an ape that talks, and this is just done, to take away his rights. It's sort of atheistic Darwinism is the two competing things in society are atheistic Darwinism and Christianity. I realize there's a whole bunch of other religions and a whole bunch of other cultures, but those are the two dominant ones, okay? Let's see, what else here? So atheistic Darwinism is the path to eugenics and communism and all that kind of stuff. It believes that people are just talking monkeys and they should have owners, and it's a justification for slavery. And all through history, you got to remember, slavery's been the norm and serfdom. Okay, this freedom, the last 200 years, this is not normal. This is a unique golden age in time in comparison. Okay, and just like a slave, a farm animal, they're saying that humans are basically, talking monkeys that have owners. They're farm animals, okay, owned by their owner. They're not entitled to a family. Farm animals don't have families. The owner of the farm animals does whatever's profitable with them. They don't have a right to life. They don't have a right to privacy. They don't have a right to anything, okay? They're just a farm animal, okay? They want to, and that whole culture destroys families, and it leads to bleak, sad, miserable lives, okay? Jordan Peterson had a good quote. Jordan Peterson, I think he's a little bit of a weasel. He won't say that he believes in God. He says he lives as if he does. And basically, if you don't believe in God, and you promote that, and he's a smart enough guy to have studied the subject, you're basically promoting atheism. You're promoting communism. That's why I think Jordan Peterson is kind of a phony. But I also like certain things about him. He's a bright guy, and he knows a lot about psychology. He doesn't know anything. He's an idiot when it comes to the subject of food. But if you say atheism is an acceptable viewpoint and that it might be correct, that's communism, okay? So that's why I think he's a bit of he's not really what he pretends to be. And all these churches invite him to speak. Who are you inviting to speak? A guy who doesn't even say he believes in God? I think he's full of crap and he's a bit of a lightweight and a weasel. That's my opinion. Okay, but on the other hand, I still like him sometimes because he does say some good things and I like his psychology. All right, he also encourages people to go on neuropsychopharmaceutical drugs, which is bullshit, not true clinically. And so I think he's wrong about that. He's wrong about some other things too. And he says these things with confidence, which is bad. And it would suggest either when somebody says something with confidence, it suggests that either they know what they're talking about, or they're an ignoramus with no judgment, or they're lying. He's obviously not an ignoramus with no judgment, so I think he's intentionally lying. That's my opinion about Jordan Peterson promoting a meat diet and promoting these neuropsychopharmaceutical drugs and some other things that he says. Okay? All right. Anyways, Christianity says that a man is created in the image of God, therefore part divine. We covered that. Christianity encourages you to tell the truth, because you don't have any reason to tell the truth to talking monkey. You have no moral obligation to talking monkey. But if you look at the Bible, the Ten Commandments and all that stuff, God, love thy neighbor and all that stuff, then you're obligated to tell the truth. Okay, so I'm a Christian. I believe in God, and that's one of the reasons why I try to tell my audience the truth. I try to help you as best I can. There's really not any money in this. I'm just a bit of an egomaniac. I want to try to become one of the best doctors in the world, like Dr. McDougall. So I got to do the right thing. I got to try to help the public, the pros, all right? Because if I don't, if you're just trying to make money, you sell drugs to all the, ignorant population. Okay, let's see, that's pretty much, I got a whole bunch more slides, but that's it for this one. Oh, then there's another argument you'll hear, oh, well, Christianity's backwards and it's not good for science. That's completely untrue. Isaac Newton, the greatest scientist of all time, the smartest man who ever lived, he was like one of the most intensely religious persons who ever lived, an intensely religious Christian. 1665 was Anno Mirabilis, where he discovered optics, the law of gravity, invented calculus, and did work in fundamental thermodynamics all in 1 year, okay, while he was, vacationing away from the plague. He just graduated from Oxford, and he was living at his family cottage in Woolthorpe. So this is a painting of him in Woolthorpe after he saw the apple fall, and that apparently Voltaire helped popularize him too, expanded his ideas and his concept of gravity. But you'll see there's lots of others. You want to see a modern scientist? Look up James Tour, okay? And I can also tell you, Isaac Newton inspired me in 2020, that when there was sort of like a, infectious epidemic going around, nobody knew it was going to happen. I just totally isolated myself and became simple, and I published 6 books in 1 year. Okay, so the energy comes from this. You want to talk about something that energizes people for achievement in the arts or the sciences? Christianity is incredibly great for that. Other thing I like about Christianity is it welcomes things in. It doesn't care about where stuff comes from as long as it's good. So it welcomed in a lot of great ideas from the Greek philosophers and scientists. And look at this painting, for example. There is Plato pointing up to the sky, the perfect forms. There's Aristotle pointing down to the ground, saying, let's pay attention to the practical things here on earth, being largely a biologist, Aristotle was. Magnificent Roman architecture over here. Socrates arguing or debating with Alcibiades and others. So anyways, there's all kinds of great things in this painting. But that's what Christianity will do. This was in the Vatican, so the Vatican accepted it. They are willing to learn from other cultures. They're not just saying, if you aren't only like our one book, get out of here. No, they learn from a lot of other cultures. Plus, talk about an open religion. Anybody can join Christianity. It's not exclusive of anybody. Anybody that wants to can. It works in practical ways. And here's just another great writer, Charles Dickens, the best writer of the English, best writer from England, I think, ever. Okay, you can say Shakespeare, but Shakespeare is not as English as we think, in the sense that he was a Catholic. Actually, I think that's why most people don't know about it, because he had to keep that a secret. But I love the book Christmas Carol. It's my favorite novel ever written. It's just so beautiful, magnificent. It's real short too. You could read it on a weekend. And so Tiny Tim survived because Scrooge helped out the poor Cratchit family. All right, it's a beautiful story. Scrooge turned his life around, and that's kind of what Christianity gives, this hope that one can turn things around, because everybody's got problems in their life and things that are really they're sad about. You look at Alcoholics Anonymous. Who's most likely to get better than Alcoholics Anonymous? A person who doesn't just follow AA, but a person who also converts themselves to Christianity. Sort of their addiction becomes from alcohol to Christianity, and it takes that place in their life, and they are much more successful at coming off the booze. Okay, I just showed this guy, John Ruskin. He was sort of one of the leaders of the Renaissance movement in England in the mid-1800s, and he really did a lot. He was a wealthy millionaire. He could have done whatever he wanted, but he dramatically promoted the Pre-Raphaelites, a bunch of Christian artists that were the best painters ever in the history of England. And then a whole bunch of other post-Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood painters came along that were magnificent, like Leighton, for example. This guy right here, John Everett Millais, was the best of the Pre-Raphaelites in my opinion. And this guy, John Ruskin, yeah, he was a little bit crazy. All the geniuses are a little bit crazy, but he was a great man too. And man, could he write his speeches. He learned, people who learn the Bible, religious stories when they're young, also fairy tales are good too. They end up just more articulate, and they end up just being better writers. I mean, he was a magnificent writer in his prime. I liked John Ruskin. I made a whole book chapter about the guy. Again, of course he's a little crazy, but he's great. Okay, and some people say, well, what about some of these other religions? Look, I studied some of this Buddhism, some of this Eastern stuff, and it's godless. There's no God, okay? So it might be relaxing, it might lower your stress level, but I don't think it inspires great motivation or achievement. I studied tons and tons of geniuses, and I keep finding over and over, Christianity inspired me, Christianity inspired me, okay? I've never seen one where they say Buddhism inspired me, okay? When Ashok, this, terrible, brutal conqueror, conquered India, what did he do? Like 2 weeks later, he says, oh, I've converted to Buddhism. I want everybody to convert to Buddhism. Sit around and meditate. He wants to pacify them, and I think that's partly why, meditation's so popular now, because it's like, go sit in a corner, say Om, and shut up, and don't give me any trouble, okay? It pacifies people. I don't think it energizes people. That might be good if you're trying to lower your stress, but, I wanted to be strong. I wanted to be smart. I wanted to have the energy to crank out a book chapter in a day, be able to work 12 hours straight intellectually. That takes a lot of energy and concentration, and Christianity helps people to get that. Let's see, what else? By the way, modern science came from Christianity. The idea of hypothesis, experiment, analyze results, adjust hypothesis, repeat experiments. That came from Christianity. It didn't come from anywhere else, all right? Because the idea that the universe is rational, that it's meaningful, that it's knowable, all right? That's what pushed it. So, a lot of what you read in school are false terms. Like people say, oh, the Dark Ages. That's a bullshit term made up to discredit Christianity. Okay, same thing with the so-called Enlightenment, that when they moved away from God, they became enlightened. That's not true either. Like I said, the most religious guy was the best scientist, Isaac Newton. Take a look at James Tour of the modern ones, okay? Time after time, you see that when you actually read about the individual people, that it totally energized them and increased what they could do. It just gets the metaphysics right for life is meaningful, and you too could create something great, and you can understand this world. It is a rational world. Okay, what else? The churches are open. Anybody can walk in and look. You want to get an education in art and history, walk around inside a church. Lots of them are beautiful. The older churches are more beautiful. Nowadays, a lot of the churches have been taken over by jerks, idiots, and scumbags, and they're almost like just a meeting place, and they're not that good. But you go to more of the older churches, especially the cathedrals, they're magnificent. Okay, Catholic churches are a lot better than Protestant churches. Protestant churches are sort of bleak inside. They sort of took on this craziness from Luther. Oh, the statues and pictures and paintings are idolatry. What kind of idiocy is that? Once they've gone down that path, then their churches become boring, bleak, and ugly, okay? So I'll take a Catholic church appearance any day over Protestant. Like I said, it's open Christianity. Anybody can join. Communism is like a closed gang. I mean, if you don't get to be a member of the Communist Party, especially a high-ranking member, then everyone else is a slave. Let's see, what else? Christianity is the friend of the common man. People want it. They go to Christ out of love, not out of fear, like Bertrand Russell said. They go to Christ out of love. They want it. I mean, look what Christianity does. It tells the common man his life is meaningful. Look what atheism and communism tell the common man. They tell him that he's just a talking monkey. He better keep his mouth shut and do as he's told. And all his money and property is going to be taken away from him anyways. Okay, great. And that's what people want? I'll tell you something. In society, if people will say that atheism is okay and atheism becomes the accepted way in this country, I guarantee you, you will have no rights. Zero, none. That is communism, okay? And that's why rulers always want communism. If you give any man total power like the Roman emperors had, they're going to declare themselves to be a god. And then some of the Roman emperors, they would insist on having a different woman to have sex with every single day. That's what it leads to. Atheistic, total power in the hands of one man. He calls himself a god. He insists, he forces a different woman to be with him every single day. And free speech is not at all allowed. Look at Emperor Nero. He thought the Christians were annoying. They wouldn't say that he's a god. So he just, put them up on a pole and he burned them as torches at night. Okay, that's what happens with no God, because there are no rules. If you've got Christianity, you've got a biblical worldview, you got to follow the Ten Commandments, be nice to people, consider them creatures in the image of God. If you don't have that, then a human means nothing. They don't have a soul. They're just a talking monkey. You can do whatever you want to them. You could feed them to each other. The cannibalism is okay. Everything is okay if you don't have God in these types of rules, the Ten Commandments and a biblical worldview. It actually really does matter. And a lot of people, you have to study history to know this, that the world's been brutal since the beginning of recorded history. And there are just little gaps in time where things are good. And we sort of had that in America, and hopefully we'll be able to keep it. But it looks like it's fading away, and we don't want that. I certainly don't want it. I want freedom. I want to be able to have a free conversation. I want to be able to study freely, okay? Because basically, you think about, you want to have a conversation about health, about nutrition, pathophysiology, toxicology. Most of what you get from these big corporations who run the world is not true. They're going to tell you all kinds of crap, like soy is a health food, olive oil is good for you, caffeine is good for you. That's all bullshit. They just want to market their product, but it'll be like against the law, misinformation. There'll be some, committee of safety fact checker will tell you, oh, you can't say that on the internet. That's what's coming in the near future if we don't maintain free speech, okay? And Christianity promotes free speech. It tells the individual man his life is meaningful, that God loves him. What an honor. God loves him, okay? Of course people would want that. Why wouldn't people want that their life is meaningful, that God loves them, okay? And it gives them hope that their life can improve. It gives them hope that they can redeem themselves if they've fallen into alcoholism or drug addiction or some other, mistaken way of life, that heaven exists. There's hope for an afterlife. Christianity provides lots of good role models. There's the saints. There's all kinds of good people in everyday life who Christianity has motivated. I saw my mother, man. My mother was the best person I ever met in my whole life. She was like a saint, okay? And she was totally energized by Christianity. She did all kinds of incredibly good things. And that's where her energy came from. She had all these little saints. She prayed to them, especially she loved St. Jude, the patron saint of hopeless causes, Padre Pio, all this stuff. And I saw her save people's lives by her faith and her goodness and her kindness. I saw it. I saw it on a daily basis. Religion means like relegare in Latin, and to tie. Legare is from ligate, to tie things together, and that's what it does. It ties the people together. That's also why, if you've got some, Roman emperor tyrant, they don't want the people to have some religion that unites them. They want them all weak and separate, and, what was the Roman motto was divide and conquer. They want all their little colonies to be sort of very weak and easy to control. A bunch of slaves. Okay, Christianity is complementary to laissez-faire capitalism. That's not rigged. So laissez-faire capitalism is the best possible economy, not rigged. And that together, that combination, creates wealth and freedom. That's as good as it gets. Study it around. You look for golden ages in society, that's what you're going to find, okay, in the modern world the last couple hundred years. Okay, and one of the most things that's underrated is how great things were in the 1800s. And Ayn Rand talks about this too. So much great literature came out of that time period. There's plenty of bad stuff too, but tons of great stuff. There's always going to be bad stuff, but a lot of times there's not even any good stuff. Okay, nothing good comes from Soviet Russia. It's a shithole. Okay, nothing good comes from communist China. It's a shithole. Okay, so at least if you've got Christianity, you're still going to have some bad stuff, but you can at least have some good stuff too. What about people who say Christianity is not true? I would tell them, there's a lot of stuff. If you want to read about Christian apologetics, The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel is the best introductory book on the subject. I've read a bunch of books on the subject. That's the best one. He was like a journalist, and he's a really good, entertaining writer. He actually was an atheist, and he didn't like his wife being Christian. Then he studied it, and he converted to Christianity, and he became a priest, a pastor, okay? It's amazing how often I've seen lots of people do that. They want to debunk Christianity, and then they study it, and they're like, oh my God, this is the right religion. This is the best one, okay? That happens all the time. You'll see that if you start studying Christian apologetics. Okay, does God exist? The best book to get introduced to the question of whether or not God exists, I made a whole other video about this, is Atheism Dead by Eric Metaxas. That's the best introductory book on the subject. There's lots more. I'm not going to get into all the apologetics at this time. So that's where you go if you want to study that aspect of it. It produces the best art, the best architecture, the best music, and it produces very nice people. I mean, there's lots of really nice people from all kinds of different groups, but Christianity makes Christians a lot better than they would be if they didn't have it. I can say that from a lot of experience. I know Christians who've become atheists, and a lot of them, they just turn into shitheads. The ones I know turn into alcoholics, drug addicts, commit suicide, they're less resilient, they drop out of school, they're screw-ups. And then you go on the internet, all these ones that are members of the Communist Party, they're real nasty, and they pretend they know what they're talking about. It's all BS. But low IQ people are tricked by that. Let's see, what else? Atheistic Darwinism, it's the highway to hell. It's the highway to Stalinism. Hell is basically life without God. It's like living in a subway all your life, like Plato's cave. It's worse than that. Okay, here's Proverbs 16:25. There is a way that seems right to man, but its end is the way of death. The left brain is sort of the so-called rational, logical brain, and when that takes over, it sort of thinks it's right. And you look at the French Revolution, what an awful disaster that was, and that's what you get with atheism. Okay, then look at in comparison, look at America in 1776. That was a God-based people, and that was a great thing about freedom. Okay, there's really a big difference between America's transition to freedom in 1776 versus what happened in France in 1793. Atheistic communism hates the common man. It says he's just a talking monkey and he better be a good slave or he'll get his butt kicked. And then people say, well, what about the Spanish Inquisition? The Spanish Inquisition was bad. Yeah, the Spanish Inquisition was bad, but it was run by the king, okay, and he used it as a political tool to get his enemies. And he killed, the Spanish kings over the years killed about 2,000 people in 400 years. Of course, that's awful, that's bad, that's terrible, but it's no comparison to like a communist government. Take a look at Stalin. Stalin killed 65 million people, mostly Christians, in 40 years. Oh, communism doesn't want Christianity. He plowed over 48,000 churches and killed 65 million churches. That's what communism is all about. And if communism comes to America, I guarantee you, they're going to kill or imprison all the Christians. They're going to bulldozer, knock down all the churches, and everyone else is going to be made into a slave. That's what communism does, okay? Other than the Communist Party. All right. They don't want anything that makes people happy or united. They just want them to shut up and be good little slaves. Okay, atheistic Darwinism, it causes poverty and misery. It's a disaster. Ann Coulter had joked that communism in Russia created 70 years in a row of bad weather. The joke being that once the farmers no longer could profit from their work, they did as little as possible. So that's what the kind of crap you get. And the best book ever written on communism is Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. It's a masterpiece. Okay, he was a guy who had been like a tank commander in World War II, and he thought after they conquered Germany, he thought he would come back to Russia like a hero, and he'd have his pick of the ladies and money and all this stuff, and instead, he got thrown in the Gulag in prison for being corrupted by the West. Okay, and by the way, there's far more evidence in support of God's existence than against it. Then other people say, well, what's the difference between, Jesus Christou and, the Greek gods? Well, the Greek gods were sort of products of this earth. They were sort of, they sort of came from it. And a lot of them were metaphors, you know. Zeus came out of being a metaphor for lightning originally, so to speak. And other ones, Poseidon, a metaphor for the power of the sea. Whereas the biblical God created everything. So he's a much higher up, more powerful God, and he's sort of outside the picture, if you will. So I'll just show a couple paintings, and then I'll get into a little more stuff that you might find interesting. I'll just replay some of my debate between Nietzsche and Dostoevsky, which I thought was quite interesting. It gives a structure to a way of life. You know, these are the 7 sacraments of the church by that same artist from earlier, Roger van der Weyden, in 1445. You know, it's sort of like a baptism, you know, communion, and the death, and all these other things, how they all go together, the Easter, the Christmas. It provides a structure to the year and the saints' days. Some people say, oh, isn't worshiping a saint? You don't worship a saint, but people like a saint. And they might pray to a saint, not that they're worshiping the saint, but they like the saint, almost like they like a powerful friend, as asking them to intercede on their behalf to God. People are scared to pray directly to God sometimes, because they feel if God doesn't answer their prayer, they're screwed. There is no hope. Versus if they pray to a saint and a saint doesn't necessarily answer their prayer, they can all pray to some other saint. So that's a little bit of how that logic works. So Catholicism is more likely to pray to a saint than is Protestantism. Protestantism is more of a Bible-thumping, you know, very limited and kind of bleak in comparison with Christianity. And also, I'll tell you why I think Protestantism is a bit of a joke in comparison with Catholicism. Now, don't get me wrong. I know the modern Pope is a piece of crap. He stinks. I think the priesthood for Catholicism is very weak at this time. I think if it'll ever be any good, they have to, number one, allow priests to get married, so they'll have some more real-life experience. And number two, they need to get rid of tax exemption, because they're intellectually castrated by being afraid to say anything political, which might take away their tax exemption. So therefore, they don't really say much interesting. And now, don't get me wrong, I think it's good for kids to go to Catholic schools because they learn morality. At a public school, you learn immorality. Okay, at a Catholic school, you learn morality. They're not that great for academics, but the public schools are even worse. Okay, anyway, here's just a couple quotes from some famous people and some famous scientists. Louis Pasteur: the more I study nature, the more I am amazed by the Creator. Science brings men nearer to God. And you'll see there's tons of them that are like that. I didn't even want to collect them all. I got stacks of those quotes, and it's such a obvious thing. It's not worth going all into. Here's a nice painting. This is by Arnold Freiberger, The 10 Commandments. Rather awesome painting there. And it's got rules. You're supposed to behave. You're supposed to be nice. Okay, and then there's the idea of the Last Judgment, which helps teach kids morals. You know, you say, well, if you're good and you honor the rules of God, you'll get to go to heaven in the afterlife, and that's sort of what heaven is, life with God, and hell is life without God. If you reject God and His commandments, you go to hell. And so people need something to motivate them. You need to teach kids morals and religions when they're young. If they don't get it when they're young, they'll probably never get it. And there's a great quote by Voltaire. Now, Voltaire is a bit of a mixed bag. On the one hand, he was largely a villain and anti-Christian in a lot of ways. In other ways, he was very Christian. And, you know, one of the things Voltaire says, even if God didn't exist, we would have to invent him. I want my doctor to believe in God, and my lawyer and my tailor, because if they don't, they might rob me. And that's true. People have a lot more morals if they believe in God and, you know, respect for the individual. Ayn Rand had said the individual is the smallest minority in society, and I think that's important to remember too. Okay, another nice thing about Christianity, it loves and honors the family. It puts the family on a pedestal of what one should love and respect, and I think that's important. If you don't honor and love and respect the family, then your population's likely to go extinct, okay? You know, Jordan Peterson had said that same thing in so many ways, and everybody who studied societies knows that you have to love children and want to nourish and help them and develop them if you're going to have a successful society that continues on, okay? And Christianity, it's the best for honoring the family. I mean, there's picture after picture, all these beautiful pictures of love for the child, okay? And, you know, the Christ is the embodiment of the child in the Nativity, Christmas pictures, but it echoes through Christianity, this love of the family. Honor, and look at the 10 Commandments, honor thy father and mother. I mean, it's just built into it. When I was growing up, man, you totally respected your parents. There was whatever my parents said, that was it. I mean, that's how it was, and it was actually better in those days. Okay, you know, a little bit more of the same thing. This is a nice Norman Rockwell Saying Grace painting. Kids grow up better with that, and they also grow up better with intact families. It used to be, when I was a kid growing up, there were hardly any divorces. Nowadays, there's more often than not the families are divorced. When I was a kid, it was the divorced families where the moms working, where we would go and have parties. Okay, that's where you'd have parties, because there'd be no parents around, and kids would drink beer, you know, in high school. All kinds of crap happened in the divorced family houses. Okay, it helps keep families together, and when families are together, they all benefit from that. Somebody had said that the family is, God's invention to create paradise on earth, and Aristotle had said the family is how the invention that helps God's invention to help man meet his needs. Okay, and the nice thing about a family is everybody's different. None of this we're all equal and the same. No, everybody is what they is. Some are older, some are younger, some are male, some are female. And that variety and them having different unique insights and skills, they help each other, and that's how it should be. Okay, and then here's sort of an iconic picture. This is by Thomas Kincaid, painter of light. He actually sold more paintings than any artist in the history of the world. And the reason is he paints stuff that people like. And this is basically kind of how I remember Christmas growing up. It was beautiful. It was the best time of the year. I have books of Tom Kincaid's painting. I love his paintings. And this sort of is a typical Thomas Kincaid painting. There's a joy in the season, and there's a happiness in it, and everyone's looking forward to it, and people come home from being far away and join together with each other. I had a long-distance girlfriend when I was in college for a while, and oh man, I could not wait to see her. It's great, okay? It's the best holiday. It's the best time of the whole year. It's magnificent. You want to get rid of that and change it to winter holiday or some BS like that? Come on, are you stupid? It ruins it, okay? All right, Salisbury Cathedral. And the other thing, too, Christianity is not exclusive. Anybody from other religions or whatever, they can participate in it and they're welcome. It's not like an exclusive thing. Okay, look at this building. Okay, it's a Protestant cathedral, but on the outside of it is magnificent. I prefer the Catholic cathedrals with all the statues on there, all the gargoyles and the saints and all that stuff. I think they're even better, but still, it's still magnificent and beautiful. And then here's a beautiful nature scene, and I love the scene. Among the Sierra Nevada Mountains by Albert Bierstadt. This is one of the greatest landscape paintings of all time. And like the deer, they bring life to the painting, and it's sort of like God's art is nature. And this feeling, this is sort of like almost I have a religious feeling about this painting. I went to Yosemite when I was young, and it was magnificent. When I was in college, I thought I might become a biologist, and I had some friends that wanted to become biologists, and man, we just loved hiking around these places and studying all this stuff. And there's a sense of awe and joy at God's creation. It's just awesome, magnificent. Okay, now here, just briefly, I'll mention this. This is a painting called A Private View at the Royal Academy, and with Oscar Wilde in here. So here's Oscar Wilde. And now, I love Oscar Wilde. He's an Irish guy. He goes to England. Everybody hates him because he's Irish, but he's such a genius that he becomes the best, most successful playwright in Ireland. By the way, he was like a closet Catholic. He officially converted to Catholicism, during the last days of his life, but he had been sort of a closet Catholic much longer than that. If you read a lot of his other short stories and whatnot, you will see that, and that's well known. Anybody who studied, I read like 3 or 4 biographies of him, and so I love the fact he was so clever and so witty. And he actually had his own artistic movement, the aesthetic movement it was called, along with Potter and some of these guys out of Oxford, and he called it art for art's sake. But basically, art for art's sake, it definitely deserves a place, but it just doesn't hold up as well as when you've got sort of a Christian theme somewhere in the background in there. It helps. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of great art that is not intrinsically Christian, but I can tell you the best art tends to be Christian. There's exceptions to that. I know there's exceptions to that. Robert Bateman's pictures of nature. They're just pictures of nature. There's no religion there. Of course that is true. But what I am saying is when you look at art-based religion with a component of art, you will see there's something special about it. And the best speech, again, is the 1853 speech by John Ruskin on the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. If you're interested in art, I recommend you play that and listen to it. It's about an hour long. It's extraordinary. And the key line of it, a little spoiler alert here, but the key line of it is, pagan art was great because it built to its gods. And pre-Raphaelite art was great because it built to its God, versus modern art is not great because it builds to no God. That's sort of like one of the punchlines in Ruskin's speech, and trust me, it's an awesome speech. It's one of the greatest of all time. Okay, and this is sort of a modern concept. Basically, the sheep are stranded in a storm, and they got a couple dogs to protect them, but the dogs can't do much. There's a pack of wolves coming to kill the sheep. They can rally to the cross and, form a circle and be okay there, or they can just stay out, individualized by themselves, out in the cold, and they will all probably get killed. And that's sort of like where things are at. Christians ought to realize that they're lucky to have Christianity, be grateful for it, support it. Otherwise, it's going to be taken away from them. It's going to be declared illegal. The Bible's going to be declared illegal. The churches are going to be smashed down, like Notre Dame was burned down. That will happen to other churches. It will be declared, illegal, hate speech or some other BS like that, and that'll be the end of Christianity. And that'll be the end of having families and everything else. If you think I'm joking, it's because you haven't studied it. Study a little history. You'll see that that is the case. Look at Plato. Even Plato, back, in 400 BC, he was pissed off that Sparta had conquered the Athens, and so he was pushing for eugenics back in ancient Greece because he felt that's the only way they could stand up to Sparta. And what I'm saying is, in other countries, man, Christianity is illegal. They'll just, throw you in jail, take your kidneys out, and sell your kidneys. Okay, that's what happens in a lot of places. It's not good. All right, so I'm just telling you, cherish it while you can and support it. You want to have nice art, music, and literature and freedom. That's where it's going to come from. And if you don't have that, you're not going to have those things. Okay, and so, to me, it's an obvious choice. You want beautiful art, beautiful music, beautiful literature, or do you want this type of crap? This is what we're sort of headed to. Here's Cemetery Entrance by Caspar David Friedrich. He's a great landscape artist. And here we're sort of walking in, and these paintings, they're kind of sad. This is Monastery Burial Ground, again by Caspar David Friedrich. He was a Lutheran German romanticist type artist. It reminds me of Charles Dickens' book, The Christmas Carol, where, the ghost of Christmas future was saying, do you want this future? No, America doesn't want this future. We want freedom. We want free speech. We want love. We want nice music. We want Christmas holiday. And so this one's called Abbey in the Oakwood, and this looks to me totally like the stuff from the movie The Ghost of Christmas Future. Caspar David Friedrich. The official name is Abbey in the Oakwood. At first I couldn't find the name for it. And then here's another thing this reminds me. It reminds me of this painting of Arnold Bocklin in 1883. It's called The Island of Death, the Isle of Death, and Isle of the Dead. And this is what atheistic Darwinism and communism leads to. Everybody's just a slave with no hope. That's why so many men from Slavic countries become alcoholics, because they got no hope. They got intelligence and brains and talent, but they're not allowed to use it. And so this is the bleakness of what that's headed to. And it doesn't have to be that way. Instead, it could be, let me show you the next slide here. It could be like this. Same artist, Arnold Bocklin. This one's 1888. He made The Island of Life. And Christianity creates a culture of life. Again, love thy neighbor. We can be creators, make beautiful music, beautiful art, beautiful buildings. We can be good to each other, help each other, kind to each other, forgive each other. Things could be good. It doesn't have to be, this modern crazy crap hole. Okay, I got a little something different coming up now here. So this was a previous video. I've condensed it, some of the highlights. There's a great debate, and it's actually a philosophical debate where I just took quotes from Nietzsche and Dostoevsky and had them in a discussion about whether or not there should be religion. He was the greatest anti-Christian philosopher of all time. He declared that his name should be the Antichrist. He specifically said, Nietzsche, that his goal was to destroy Christianity. Whereas Dostoevsky was quite the opposite. Dostoevsky sensed that Russia was either going to become more Christian or it was going to deteriorate back into an awful form of slavery and cruelty. And obviously he was right. And that's what the Brothers Karamazov book is all about. That Alyosha, the Christian guy, is the only guy who really sort of leads a good, happy life. Everyone else gets messed up because their sort of values are not set. But anyways, let's take a look at their quotes. I think you might find this interesting. Okay, in this corner we have Friedrich Nietzsche, the Antichrist. Okay, in this other corner we've got Nietzsche, by the way, his book, Ecce Homo, where he said, Behold the Man, he wanted his book to replace the Bible. He felt that the Bible was no longer necessary. People could just read his book. Okay? In a godless society, the ruler is God, and Nietzsche thought that he should be the equivalent of God in the modern world. Okay, Dostoevsky lived from 1821 to 1881. He was a Russian Orthodox Christian. And by the way, in 1860 in Russia, 10% of Americans were slaves, but 90% of Russians were slaves or serfs. Dostoevsky wasn't an aristocrat, but he was also above being a serf. His father got killed by the pissed off serfs. Okay, let's see. Okay, the next thing we're going to get to the real debate. That was just the intro. Okay, so it starts with Nietzsche. He says, He who has a why to live can bear any how. To live is to suffer. To survive is to find some meaning in the suffering. Dostoevsky. The mystery of human life goes beyond just staying alive. It seeks something to live for. Nietzsche. Great intellects are skeptical. There are no facts, only interpretations. I cannot believe in a God who wants to be praised all the time. The strength of a person can be measured by how much truth he can tolerate, or more precisely, to what extent he needs it to be softened, sweetened, muted, or falsified. You wonder, where has your God gone? Well, I shall tell you. Your God is dead, and we have killed him, you and I. What did we do when we unchained the earth from the sun? Whither is it moving now? Has it not become colder? Is more and more night coming on all the time? How shall we console ourselves? I come too early. This event is still on its way. It has not yet reached the ears of men. That's Nietzsche. So God is dead and we have killed him, according to Nietzsche. Dostoevsky says, if you were to destroy in mankind the belief in immortality, not only love, but every living force maintaining the life of this world would at once be dried up. Moreover, everything would be immoral. Nothing would be unlawful, not even cannibalism. And that's from Brothers Karamazov. If there is no God, then everything is permitted, including cannibalism. Nietzsche says, your God is dead and you've killed him. Get over it. Dostoevsky, if there is no God, everything is permitted. Okay. Nietzsche, I philosophize with a hammer. If God is dead, there is no such thing as morality. It's like Darwin and Spencer. Remember, atheistic Darwinism, they go together. The British wanted Darwinistic philosophy because it justified them enslaving their colonies. And it justified them, killing anybody who didn't agree with them. So a ruler is going to want atheistic Darwinism because it basically says they're God and they can do whatever they want to other people. Nietzsche, now we're continuing with the debate, says, verily, I have often laughed at the weaklings who thought themselves good because they have no claws. Okay, here's a quote by Paul Johnson, a little interlude in the debate between Nietzsche and Dostoevsky. He's sort of the great English historian. He says, man owes his humanity to the notion of God. And if this notion disappears from his thoughts and his vocabulary, then humanity would disappear too. Man without God is a doomed creature. The history of the 20th century proves this view, that as the vision of God fades, we first become more clever monkeys, then we exterminate each other. Okay, so Nietzsche continues. Christianity is the snake that swallowed its own tail. Your churches are not churches. They are just tombs for a dead God. After coming in contact with a religious man, I feel as if I must wash my hands. There is not enough love and goodness in the world for us to give it away to imaginary beings. Dostoevsky. Even those who renounce Christianity and criticize it, in their innermost being, they still try to follow the Christian ideal. No one has been able to create a higher ideal of man and virtue than the ideal given by Christ. Nietzsche. The New Testament is too rococo. Upon reading the New Testament, one feels as if they are reading a Russian novel. Mystical explanations are thought to be deep. The truth is they are not even shallow. A casual stroll through the lunatic asylum shows that faith does not prove anything. Dostoevsky. Do miracles create faith, or does faith create miracles? Nietzsche. Christianity is the religion of pity. When one gives up on Christian belief, then one deprives oneself of the right to Christian morality. Christianity is a religion of poor people, of slaves, illiterates. Why should a religion of inferior people control superior people? It is time to go beyond good and evil. I condemn Christianity. I am the Antichrist. Okay, a little intermission and some commentary from the judges of the debate. We've got some ancient philosophers. We're like in Elysian fields here where they can participate in this discussion. So Plato says, the best way to control the ignorant masses is with noble-sounding lies. Plato was sort of the big popularizer of this idea that you should lie to the public because they're too stupid to understand the truth, and it makes them easier to control. And you all know the metaphor of Plato's cave, of course. Will Durant says, the philosophes, like the atheist philosophers in France in the 1700s, they don't need religion. That's like Voltaire and Diderot, for example, Robespierre. But the average man wants it. Religion tells the average man that his life is meaningful. The atheism of the philosophers leads to despair for the average man. Rip Van Winkle. The philosophers aren't the only ones who don't like religion. Rulers don't like religion. It's too emotional. If the rabble starts thinking that their lives have meaning, they might want more freedom or property, and that could be expensive. Okay, here's a quote from Joseph Stalin. The Communist Party cannot be neutral toward religion. The Communist Party stands for science, and all religion is opposed to science. Stalin. And by the way, that's an absolute joke. I can tell you what happens. If you take religion away from science. Look at Harvard. Harvard was originally a religious college. Now that Harvard is atheistic, it's a piece of crap. I can tell you this. I will debate any doctor from Harvard Hospital on the subject of chronic disease. They stink. They're crap. I have all their books, okay? I've read their books. They are wrong on every single chapter in regard to chronic disease, okay? And it's so easy to refute, it's not even funny. Number one, coronary artery disease. They're going to tell you need statins, stents, and open heart surgery. But that's a joke. Esselstyn gets much better results. How come Esselstyn's not even in the book? Okay? How come Ornish, Kepner, none of these doctors are in the book? Autoimmune disease. They don't even mention leaky gut. But we know, people who study nutrition, that leaky gut's the most common cause of autoimmune disease. How come that's not in the book? Because you make a lot more money selling drugs, okay? And it goes on and on. Hypertension. They say 95% of hypertension is idiopathic, essential hypertension. No one knows the cause. BS. We all know high salt diets, high fat diets, high animal protein diets, they cause hypertension. Populations don't eat that way. They don't have any hypertension. Zero, okay? All right, except for some rare, 1 in 20,000 case or some BS like that. So basically what I'm saying is, it's like that chapter after chapter after chapter, all right? The books are wrong. Okay, so what happens is when you don't have God and an obligation to tell people the truth, you end up with a book that's full of lies. All right, and that's what happens. So science needs God a lot more than God needs science. You don't need God to do a single individual experiment, but you need God to motivate scientists to tell the truth. Right now, the way a scientist makes money for a university, a big, Ivy League medical center, for example, is they have to please Big Pharma because that's where all the money is. They have to promote a drug because that's how you get money. You don't get money for telling the truth. There's no money in this. I do this website just as a hobby. I want to try to help people, but I don't make 10 cents with this website. Okay, let's see, what else? Plant Man Prometheus. This, by the way, comes from a book, one of my books. I don't even remember what book this was. I had all these debates in there. Okay, Plant Man Prometheus. Religion and Freedom. I think it might have been my Journey to Optimal Health book. Okay. Plant Man Prometheus. Religion and freedom and speech are the power of the poor, and that's why rulers forbid religion and censor speech. The rulers do not want the ignorant masses to expect forgiveness or to have hope. Nikita Khrushchev. Okay, you can decide. Do you like the philosophy of Jesus Christou, love thy neighbor, forgive, and all that stuff, or do you want the philosophy of Nikita Khrushchev? Here's Nikita Khrushchev, the leader of Russia in the 1960s. We have no use for the policy of the Gospels. If someone slaps you, just turn the other cheek. We have shown that anyone who slaps us will get his head kicked off. Okay? Yeah, what a nice country, Russia in the 1900s. What a shithole. Okay, Plant Man Prometheus. Rulers want the masses to be subliterate laborers. They don't want them to be self-righteous, liberal arts, hyper-educated types. There's been a push in this country to try to get rid of the liberal arts in universities. Liberal arts, even if a person's going to science, they should still study the liberal arts. It teaches them to be more articulate. It teaches them to think more effectively. Okay, rulers prefer Darwinian atheism. Talking apes do not have any rights. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, author of Gulag Archipelago, said this: the reason all of this happened, meaning communism in Soviet Russia in the 1900s, and Stalin killed 65 million Russians, is because the people had forgotten God. If you don't have a God-based worldview, guess what? Then you're just a talking monkey and you have no rights. And it doesn't matter what the individual feels. It's what society agrees upon, because that's what sets the pattern for the laws. Charles Leibniz, the great co-inventor of calculus, okay, here's what he said. There is only either God or nothingness. You either believe in God and have a God-based society, or you don't. And if you don't, then you're just a talking monkey by modern atheistic Darwinism standards. And that's why you have to have God. I believe in God based on all the scientific evidence. Okay? And the other thing, too, people are going to say, oh, well, that you're stupid and that Darwinism explains life on Earth. That's ridiculous. Okay? Darwinism has nothing to do with life on Earth. Let me explain that point, that statement. The origin of life is prebiotic. It comes from geological chemistry. There was no life. Okay, so it had to come from somewhere. And God's the only way to explain it. Believe me, it is so complicated just to have one individual cell that it can't be explained by so-called RNA world or protein world. Believe me, I spent many hours of my life studying all that stuff. Study James Tour if you want to understand a little bit about origin of life, how complex it really is. All right, to T.S. Eliot quote, "If you will not have God, and he is a jealous God, then you should pay your respects to Stalin." Plantman Prometheus, "Rulers prefer the populace to be passive and dull, like cows." That works well because most people prefer to be that way. Martin Luther said in the 1400s, 1500s, this was said actually, "The ordinary person, especially in the villages, knows absolutely nothing. They live like simple cattle." Actually, yeah, the good quote by Cicero. Cicero as well had said, "To not know what happened before you're born is to forever remain a child." And most people, they don't read a single book in their life outside of what they had to read in school. So they're just illiterate, functional illiterates. And they don't know any history. You have to know some history to put this all into perspective, okay? If you don't know any other history, at least study the 1900s, okay? What happened in Soviet Russia, what happened in Nazi Germany, what happened, in the United States, what happened in Vietnam, Cambodia. At least know that. I think it's much better to also have a good sense of the Greeks, the ancient Greeks, have a sense of the Renaissance, know the Bible, okay? It's good to know all that stuff, all right? I like knowing about what happened between England and Ireland. I found that was very useful to understand. Plantman Prometheus continues. Oh, no, actually, here's a quote by Nietzsche. "Martin Luther killed the Renaissance." Okay, Plantman Prometheus. He was like the narrator in one of my books, Plantman Prometheus. "Darwinian atheism makes the ruler become God, enables the ruler to do whatever they want. Anything bad they want, they can do it in Darwinian atheistic communistic society." That's why they want it, okay? For the ruler, it's the greatest deal. He can insist on a different woman's forced to be with him every night. He can insist that all his enemies, are have their kidneys taken out and sold on the black market for transplant, okay? He can do whatever he wants. Okay, Carl Jung has a quote. "In order to free the sovereign from restrictions, it tries to cut the ground out from under the religions, to prevent the individual from relying on anything but itself. It is possible to have an alternative point of view only when there is a point of reference outside the mainstream. The religions that give or claim to give such a standard, they thereby enable the individual to exercise his judgment, to think outside convention. And these religions tend to teach that there is another authority, one that is opposed to that authority of the world. So that's another reason why rulers, they don't like religion, okay? They don't want people free thinking and thinking that things should be better than they are. No way. They want them to shut up and be good slaves." Okay, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, let's see, what else did he say? He says, he came and gave some speeches in the United States. He said, "The generations now coming out of the Western schools are unable to distinguish good from bad. Even those words are becoming unacceptable, intolerant, okay, judgmental, hate speech, all bullshit. People should be allowed to have an opinion. This causes impaired thinking ability. Just as King Midas turned everything to gold, Stalin turned everything to mediocrity." Yeah, look at Stalin. Look at the 1900s. Nothing good came out of Russia. They had some good athletes because the athletes were really professionals, okay? They didn't produce any art or any music or anything, all right? I had friends that were Olympic athletes, all right, and they were, practically starving with no money. Meanwhile, the Russian guy, for being a star athlete, let's say on a wrestling team, he would have his own apartment, etc., etc. Okay, so here's Solzhenitsyn continues. "Atheism was at the core of the entire Soviet system. Atheism is what makes it possible. To do evil, a human being must first of all believe that what he is doing is good. He needs an ideology. That's what gives evil doing its long-sought justification. It gives the evildoer the necessary steadfastness to be cruel to other people." So atheism is where this all comes from, and so that's why you should not let it slide, because atheism is a way to destroy your families, to destroy freedom and wealth and private property and all these other things we love in this country. We could end up like Soviet Russia in the 1900s, or even worse, because nowadays I think it would be even worse because of all this modern computer stuff. They can run it on artificial intelligence, and it's just going to be brutally cruel and evil, and you'll have no recourse. You're just going to be dealing with an artificial intelligence machine, and it will just screw you over, social credit score, all this other BS. So hopefully that won't come to the United States, but we've gotten a lot closer to it than one would hope. Okay, Carl Jung has a quote. The decisive question for a man is he related to something infinite or not? Among my patients over 35, they all had a problem finding a religious outlook on life. Every one of them had fallen ill because he had lost what the living religions of every age had given their followers. And none of them has really been healed who did not regain his religious outlook. Religion is a basic human need. Yeah, religious people are healthier and they live longer. Okay, now we got just a little bit more of this debate. I think I got about 2 more slides, and we're almost winding down here. Okay, now Dostoevsky speaks. God and the devil are fighting for the heart of man. Nietzsche, I will believe in your Redeemer. when Christians look a little more redeemed. Dostoevsky. What is the use of Christ's words unless we set a good example? We are all responsible for everyone, and I am more responsible than anyone else. Nietzsche. Your God is dead and you have killed him. Dostoevsky. If someone proved to me that Christ is outside the truth, then I should prefer to remain with Christ than with the truth. If you drive God from this earth, we shall shelter him underground. Voltaire pops in with a comment. If God did not exist, we would have to invent him. I want my doctor and Taylor to believe in God so they don't rob me. Okay, now here's from the book Brothers Karamazov, the chapter on the Grand Inquisitor. And by the way, there's a lot of people, myself included, consider this the best book chapter in any book ever written in the history of the world. All right, so the Grand Inquisitor. And what had happened is Jesus Christ had come back to earth. It was set sometime, let's say, around the 1600s, and there was a Spanish Inquisition, and the Grand Inquisitor was the leader of it. And at first, Jesus Christ had been seen by the people, and they loved him, and everyone was so happy, and it was all wonderful. But then the Grand Inquisitor found out about him and threw him into prison. And the Grand Inquisitor then goes in to talk to him, and he says, Why hast thou come to hinder us? For thou hast come to hinder us, and thou knowest that. But dost thou know what will be tomorrow? I know not who thou art, and care not to know whether it is thou or only a semblance of him. But tomorrow I shall condemn thee, and burn thee at the stake as the worst of heretics. And the very people who have today kissed thy feet, tomorrow, at the faintest sign from me, they will rush to heap up the embers of thy fire. Knowest thou that? For 15 centuries we have wrestled with thy freedom, but now it is ended and over for good. Today men are more persuaded than ever that they have perfect freedom, yet they have brought their freedom to us and laid it humbly at our feet. Dost thou know that the ages will pass, and humanity will proclaim by the lips of their sages that there is no sin, there is only hunger, and we alone shall feed them in thy name, declaring falsely that it is in thy name. And in the end, they will lay their freedom at our feet and say to us, Make us your slaves, but feed us. Okay, this is the last slide. Plantman Prometheus speaks up. Smart people like freedom. Do you know why smart people like freedom more than stupid people? Because a stupid person never says anything interesting. A stupid person can't challenge anything. A stupid person doesn't have the ability to speak in an unconventional way because they don't know anything. Versus, I get nervous sometimes. Okay, I'm a doctor and I recognize that, the Ivy League textbooks are pieces of crap and they're like wrong on, 4 out of 5 subjects. Okay, so I need the freedom to say that. Okay, Stalin, if his Communist Party scientists, somebody disagreed with his Communist Party scientists, they would put the guy in jail, okay? And there has been some bullshit on the internet where people get in trouble for so-called misinformation. They're not allowed to have an opinion on subjects. People should be allowed to have an opinion on subjects. And it's the best scholars, the best scientists, the best doctors. They're the ones that are going to challenge conventional opinion. Look at McDougal. Can you imagine if, the dairy industry ran the Communist Party? Then to criticize dairy would be misinformation, okay? Okay, Grand Inquisitor speaks up now. Actually, there was a little bit more coming from the Grand Inquisitor. I had one more quote from him. This is the last quote from the Grand Inquisitor. By insisting on freedom of choice, you have limited salvation to only thousands of people. But what about the millions of people who can't handle freedom? You make a mockery of them. Why hast thou come to hinder us? We have corrected thy work and have founded it on mystery and authority. And men rejoiced that they were again led like sheep. We shall persuade them that they will only become free when they renounce their freedom to us and submit to us. Thou shalt see that obedient flock, who had a sign from you, heap up the hymners. I don't know how I threw that quote in there. All right. So anyways, the gist of it is the average person just wants to be told what to do. They don't want to think. They don't want to read. They don't want to learn. And there's a lot of truth in that. But, it's good that everybody's allowed to have free speech. And, and that's kind of, we can go off on all kinds of side tangents here. So I don't want to go off on a bunch of side tangents. This talk's actually gone on pretty long already. But there was a little more here. Silicone Man. This is from my book. Silicone Man says, that's right. The average man doesn't care about freedom. He doesn't want the vegan diet. He doesn't want all this stuff. He doesn't care about books or history or the Greeks and the Romans. None of this stuff. He doesn't care. He doesn't care about the Renaissance. The average man wants beer and pizza and a woman, okay? He just wants social media on his phone and TV. That's it. He's just a talking ape. Plant Man Prometheus. We are more than that. We are created in the image of God. Silicone Man. You can't prove that. All the biology teachers in all the high schools and all the colleges, they say that man is just a talking ape, a monkey. Plant Man Prometheus. That's because they get fired if they mention intelligent design. By the way, I believe in intelligent design. Just so you know, I'm an A+ student in evolutionary biology at Stanford, which is a Harvard equivalent school. And I can tell you, I believe in intelligent design based on extensive study of the subject. And there's numerous other biology experts who will tell you the same thing. Scientists try to pretend they know far more than they do. And, you know, it's just like Big Pharma can't compete with the vegan diet, not even 1% success of the vegan diet. And so that's what it is also in a lot of the science stuff. Silicone Man. Freedom is expensive. It leads to chaos. Look at the wars between all these countries. The only hope for peace is a globalist society where most of the people are subliterate laborers. Plant Man Prometheus. Well, could we at least have a health aristocracy that can enjoy organic, whole food, vegan, organic diet? That be available. Could we at least be allowed to have books and learn about history and art and philosophy and religion and true science? So anyways, hopefully it won't ever get that bad. But anyways, that summarizes why I think Christianity ennobles people and energizes them and leads to great achievements that benefit everyone. So that's it.